Night Terrors #4, written by Josh Williamson, art by Giuseppe Camuncoli, Stefano Nessi, Caspar, Wijngaard, colors by Frank Martin and Caspar Wijngaard, letters by Troy Petiri. And we start out with Dead Man. He is reading a Dead Man comic. He's talking about the idea that there are no happy endings or, victors in a horror story. There's only survivors. It's kind of funny when you say that by the end, our main big bad ends up kind of dying, but it's wonky. I mean, I'm going to keep saying it. Now that you got it in my head, I'm going to keep saying it. But in this, we end up having the last issue where Dead Man in Batman's body, he did get a hold of the Nightmare Stone. Now, the Nightmare Stone, we still don't really know much about. And I just want to ask you, if me and you are in this story, it's Rocky, Jim, and Dead Man. And Dead Man says to you, hey, you know that thing that Insomnia did all of this to get? He's depressed. He can't get his hands on it. He's been going after trying to kill. But do you think we should take it to him?
Yeah.
No. This isn't Mount Doom. This isn't the Ring, right?
You got to change the name of Dead Man to Brain Dead Man. Is what I tell him.
Is.
I mean, that's not.
It really is. I mean, it's ridiculous the way that he comes up with this idea. Now, I thought that at the end of last issue, remember when you had, and there was a little bit of an ambiguous deal, who was really there getting this Nightmare Stone, because you ended up having the Nightmare Stone in the eyes of Batman. I thought maybe Insomnia had done a switcheroo and was controlling Dead Man and making it. But in this, it just seems like it's Dead Man who wants to go to, I want to free Insomnia with this. But nobody knows what this does. It's never really explained what exactly the Nightmare Stone ends up doing. And I still want to know, when are they going to go get the Dream Stone? Because in this wonky non-rules deal, I would think it goes against Dream, Nightmares, go for it. But they don't even do that yet. And I'm sure they have to eventually. But in this, we don't know what the Nightmare Stone is. So when he says we can free Insomnia with it, it's just like, I don't think that's going to work. And so it's a weird play to have a story like this really hinge on a villain that we only know little bits, and we keep getting little bits of. That, I think, is one of the worst things to do in this whole story, is to dribs and drab the villain, then tried to make him a sympathetic character, and we'll continue in this. Do you feel any sympathy at all for Insomnia?
Not really. Well, I mean, look, let's be blunt. Insomnia's character, I think his real name character was Chris something, and his family was apparently killed during death metal. And sure, I have sympathy of anybody whose family was killed. But, I mean, really, that's where my sympathy ends. And I can't underscore enough. Why would you want to free someone who is in Arkham Asylum?
Yeah.
There's a reason why they keep the asshole asleep, because they don't want him awake, because he kills people when he's awake. So what are you freeing him from? The whole thing just seems to be odd. Like, what was the plan?
Yeah.
Perhaps I can cut Joshua Williamson some slack here by saying, well, it was really Dead Man's plan, and maybe Batman was too bloody tired, and so was Damian. Because Damian, in his defense, did fall asleep.
Yeah, while he's walking upstairs here.
Yeah,
he actually falls asleep standing, which is crazy and kind of a weird play. But in that, too, as we're going forward with it. Now, also, just before I do go forward with it, you're right, though. Insomnia, he's a murderer. And it can't just be the one guy, that therapist, because they end up saying then that in the papers, they gave him the nickname as if he was a serial killer. You don't really do that for one kill. Like, he must have killed that whole therapy session, went out, started killing it, and then they finally got it, but we never saw that. So he, like you said, is a guy who is in Arkham Tower now, and he's there for a reason, though. It's not like something that I thought where, oh my God, he got caught in some weird magical crossfire and his brain got scrambled. It's nothing of his own fault, all this. And yeah, it's sad that his family died, but it's what happened after that. He's a killer and he is in Arkham for a reason. And so when he says, oh, we got to free him, and you're right. Why would you do that? Now, it goes with, and again, we're just throwing things out there, because he says, well, we'll free him, which will wake everybody up, but we don't really know that. We really don't know much about anything going on here. Everything kind of is that, oh, well, I guess that kind of works, and whatever, we don't really know, but let's go with it. But like you said, Damian falls asleep. When they go into Arkham Tower, it's clean. And that's kind of a funny play. They go in and everything's like scrubbed clean, it looks like, to them. And they're waiting for a jump scare that never comes. But I think that one of the problems, and people were talking in the Slack, and you might have been the one who brought it up, actually, the idea that we get thrown in here and there's a bunch of different things going on, but they're rapid fire and you can't really settle down with a lot of them. It's kind of neat that Damien finally does fall asleep because he had done all those techniques to stay awake, but yet he's so tired that he falls asleep. And it's weird that in this last second nightmare, he sees Batman actually tell him, hey, you're doing great, kid. Why don't you go home? And I'd like to sit there and think and analyze that, but I don't think it really means much. This is just, and so it's weird because Insomnia at this point just wants that nightmare stone, but yet here he's trying to tell Damien to leave, which wouldn't really make that much of a difference, I guess. But he's trying to get Deadman, I think, by himself to draw him in because he's kind of got him hook, line, and sinker. But even then, Damien runs his dad through and then wakes up. Oh, man, you just fell asleep for a second, little guy. It's like Sandman's the only guy there that seems to have anything going on. Like, he realizes what shit's happening, but it's too quick, right?
And it's a missed opportunity by Joshua Williamson because this whole thing, I think Joshua Williamson was trying to create some sense of misdirection here that all of a sudden it's revealed that Deadman's and Batman and Damien's master plan to defeat Insomnia was anticipated by Insomnia. And, you stupid idiots, you actually, you fell into my trap. We were provided no clues that somehow hand-delivering the very thing that Insomnia's been looking for. There's a caption at the beginning of every single Nightmare tie-in that says, Insomnia's looking for the Nightmare Stone. And then Deadman is hand-delivering it to him. And we really don't know why.
No.
Deadman thinks that somehow this is going to, I don't know, free Insomnia from what? Or like it never made any sense at all.
No. It's almost like you're the villain and you want a gun. And I decide, well, if I give him the gun, maybe he'll go away. Maybe Rocky will get this. Maybe this MacGuffin stone will end up where he'll just go away. He'll wake up. It doesn't make sense, right?
Just a further point, one of the more interesting aspects here, and maybe I'm being generous by calling it interesting, well, talk about a boring origin for Insomnia. I mean, all of us guessed it. I think anybody, even with a nominal amount of DC knowledge of history, we all sort of guessed, okay, well, the Justice League killed his family. And literally, it's that boring. The Justice League killed his family. Here's my quirk. This is Joshua Williamson. Insomnia's family was killed during Death Metal. I thought at the end of Death Metal, with that deal that Wonder Woman made, I thought everybody was resurrected.
It's true.
And imagine, and in that respect, I can imagine Insomnia is pretty pissed off. He had the only family that wasn't resurrected at the end of Death Metal.
The only one. Now we're talking, right? Now we're talking.
He should be pissed off at the cosmic gods, not at the Justice League.
And I talked and I did say this myself in the Slack. We had that thing after Death Metal where we had the Infinite Frontier. Right? We were starting to go towards, remember, everybody knew there was a multiverse. And even as that was going after Death Metal, the play was, oh my God, all the multiversal Earths, everybody hated the heroes. Everybody hated the Justice League. Oh my God, you on Prime Earth, you guys always end up ruining things, but everything resets for you and you get off scot-free. Not Mr. Miracle, but scot-free. And so when that was going on, that kind of disappeared. And the stuff even with Amanda Waller kind of got, pushed to the side a little to now reemerge. And the thing is, though, if you think about the idea of that story, that was what was seemingly leading into Infinite Frontier and Dark Crisis, kind of got wiped away.
Yeah.
Is the idea of, this basic, the Justice League always does the crap that causes problems, but they never get the effects of it. Everybody else gets the effect. And that's all this is again.
I know.
This is a repeat just done. I said, at one point, it was like the macro level. Now it's the micro level. You end up having it just as one person now mad, not the multiverse. And it's a bunch of hooey. It's what it is because I'm getting mad now.
Now, I know it's a cheat whenever we reviewers play Script Doctor because it's important we review the comic as written, not as we wish it to be.
I do it a lot, though.
I'm compelled to say this one thing. This could have been cured, I think, had Joshua Williamson tweaked the plot simply as saying this. Remember when in Scott Snyder's Justice League run, there was a vote between Justice and Doom? All of humanity voted, and they voted in favor of Doom.
They voted Doom.
And Justice lost. I would have thought that Insomnia's pissed off. He should be pissed off at humanity for voting for Doom that led to death metal, that led to the death of his family. And that's why he wants to release the nightmares, to punish the majority of humanity. That to me makes more sense and is more in keeping with it.
Joshua Williamson is going with this idea, and I get it. This happens in comics all the time. It happens in every sort of medium, whatnot. The idea where you sit there and when you hear what happened, you're like, well, I guess it was the Justice League. But really, it comes down to not the idea that the Justice League allowed his family to die. It was that they weren't there to save his family. And it's such a weird little deal of most people wouldn't just be upset at you'd have bigger things to be upset about, just like you said, humanity, the idea and whatnot. But again, it goes with that idea that, the Justice League bring the problems to us without them. But the weird play is when we get to it, I really don't like the way Joshua Williamson sets it up where you have Insomnia, right? He comes home and he says, oh man, I'm late because the Justice League is fighting some crazy shit battles downtown, but we're okay. We're just going to stay here. This is the idea of a hurricane's coming. They warn you, get the hell out. And you're like, nah, we'll be fine. I can't then blame anybody but myself. So I didn't like that. But even when we're not even at the point. Deadman is still just carrying the Nightmare Stone. Yeah. It seems that through Damien, Insomnia is well aware of what's going on here. Why, oh, why would Insomnia try to stop Deadman from coming in? Why would all of a sudden he have Dove show up, a former lover, and say, hey there, you don't want this. You shouldn't do this. We should all stay like this. And why would he do this? There's no reason.
I'll ask you another question. They have the Nightmare Stone.
Yeah.
Before approaching Insomnia, who's just laying in an Arkham Asylum bed, they have the Nightmare Stone. What's the rush?
The funny thing you say, now that I'm thinking of it, why is it that there's a nightmare kind of deal going on? Deadman's not asleep. Batman's not asleep in this, and all of a sudden she pops up. Is this then the Nightmare Stone itself? There's a lot of things that I start to wonder that I think I'm giving too much credit for, because this, I think, is just, for the last bit, we'll just throw out Dove there because of that connection, and hey, I get Deadman. The problem also is why doesn't she say anything about him being Batman? And she's rubbing his face. And then it's just like, no, I would love to be dead with you, my love, but I'm going in the door. And that's where we see Insomnia. And you get, Deadman's little deal, Christopher Lucas. And this is the big bad, right? The big bad, Christopher Lucas. Nobody will remember that name in 2 weeks. That's how little this Insomnia and it has been set up. There's nothing that tells me anybody's going to remember that name because it's never really been told, and you're getting it in the last full official issue. But again, why is Deadman going there with the Nightmare? That's all he wanted. What do you think you're going to do with this? It's so ridiculous. And then to make it worse, he says, I'm going to use this Nightmare Stone. You would think that he could wave it in the air, and all of a sudden Christopher Lucas would wake up and say, oh my God, thank you for waking me up. I'm sorry. Insomnia, that's my evil. No, he decides to go in to the body, into that with the Nightmare Stone, the one thing that Insomnia wants. And he goes in. I'm like, that doesn't even make a lot of sense. But when he jumps in, we do see we get the full origin in the last official issue of the event where he comes in. That's wonky. And I said before, this is what I worry about with Joshua Williamson in events now, because he did with Dark, and everything changes down the line. You never really get a full, solid footing of the story, the rules, the big bad, everything in Dark Crisis kept changing around too. So you end up though where the past is in Gotham. He comes home, honey, I'm home. Hey, sorry, Justice League. I love it. He's like, they're fighting a monster down the street. They said we need to evacuate. But I know the Justice League will save us. So there you go. The problem is you ended up relying too much on the Justice League. Not that they did anything, but his family dies. And he even says at one point they were fighting evil Batman. That points out the death metal deal. Yeah. So you have all that, right? But I think this is Joshua Williamson's last-ditch effort. He wants us to read the story in my mind and say, I get it, because that is a cool thing. When you end up having a villain that you say, oh my God, I can kind of see where he's coming from. That twist and turns to make it like, am I evil then? Or that's a crazy deal. Something that I end up doing a lot with is the manga Death Note. which I think does it well. Like if you had a book that you can write a name in and the person would die, would you do it? And you kind of go back and forth. Well, I don't know if I would, but that makes it really good. But this isn't compelling. It's just him getting mad then because they died.
Now, we've been hard on Williamson in this issue. Yeah. Now let me defend it a bit.
Okay.
Because I do think that there's some cool moments. I actually like the fact that when we're introduced to Insomnia's initial identity is Chris Lucas, I love that he has the Justice League Scott Snyder symbol on his shirt. I think that's pretty cool. And we could have guessed it was death metal just from that. I love that his kids are wearing the Flash. And I love the fact,
big hero fans.
And I love the fact that he refuses to evacuate. Now, Insomnia, that was really dumb for him not to evacuate his family when the Justice League told him to. But the fact that he had so much faith in the Justice League that they were going to win, you just know that Chris was the guy. Chris Lucas was a guy that voted for justice. And he had so much faith in them. And the Justice League not only let him down, but his family died. So I can kind of get for Chris Lucas how devastating that would be. And so I'll give Williamson some props for that. Unfortunately, it's not enough. Yeah. I need more to get behind feeling sorry for Insomnia because I need more, and it just wasn't there. But.
And again, you end up having this play here at the very end. I mean, this is the very end where if you're going to get and you could tell throughout all this, Deadman going into the memories, it was trying to build up that sympathy, but you were showing him kill a therapist. You were showing him cut his eyelids. It wasn't really working well. So when you get this, I get it. Except that when Insomnia then starts yelling at Deadman, don't you see it? The Justice League caused the price. He actually almost says they always do this. And then I'm like, well, is this something that while you were laying around, that's thinking time? Like, oh my God, I didn't see it before. Maybe. And it would have been cool. Like you said, if you tied into Doom versus Justice, you could have even went with the idea that he'd say, I was wrong. I should have voted for Doom. Maybe that would have been better. And maybe it wouldn't have been better, but at least I'd have my family. And the idea of like really nailing it home. While he loves the Justice League or did, he obviously loves his family more and they weren't there to help him. They actually caused that problem. So, okay, that is a good concept. I just think that it was very clunky, the way that he presented it. But even in that, again, we're there with the Nightmare Stone in Insomnia, and he says, don't you get it? I don't want to kill, because that's the thing. You end up where Deadman says killing the Justice League because he was pissed when, and that's the other thing too. Was he happy when they died? Because he still seemed to be in Arkham Tower, but once they came back, he really flipped out. But the idea, Deadman says, killing them won't bring your family back. Your family's not coming back. And he says, I don't want to kill him. The death of my family was my nightmare. Justice League made a reality, so I want to return the favor by showing everybody what I see, that the Justice League aren't heroes. They're just horrors.
Let me just add to that, and let me be really schizophrenic in this. Why doesn't he just imagine his family in a nightmare, and then the nightmare becomes real at the end? That's what he says. Yeah. The Nightmare Stone makes all nightmares real, so imagine your family in a nightmare, pull them into the waking world, and you've resurrected your family.
Exactly, and the funny play is, you could say to me, oh, well, dead is better. That if they come back, they're definitely going to have to be like zombies. But there doesn't really have to be a monkey paw here, because actually Deadman jumped into memories/dreams when he went in there, and they seem fine. And I think that he could do. Why isn't he thinking that way? It's like, I get the idea. This is a villain who's so obsessed now with bringing down the Justice League that maybe he's not thinking of the full picture. And maybe that's interesting. But in here, it's just Justice League horrors, and it was set up with all of those horrific characters that were in each of the, most of the tie-ins. But he says that's what he wants to do. And he says, I wanted you to bring me the stone. I tricked you. I duped you in. And I sat there thinking when I first read this, like, was he really much of a trick? I mean, throughout all this, there really wasn't anything that I thought, oh my God, this is going to convince that it's just Deadman being an idiot. He ends up, I'm going to use this, right?
Let me just point out this other thing that an inconsistency, that Deadman, the only way Insomnia gets the stone away from Deadman is Deadman in the last issue, Night Terrors #3, at the end of that, Deadman sacrificed himself.
Yeah. Yep.
He had to do that to get the Nightmare Stone. And in this issue, Deadman tells Insomnia, you can't get the stone. It requires a sacrifice. And so Insomnia sacrifices himself.
It's wonky.
How does Insomnia sacrificing himself steal the Nightmare Stone from Deadman, who already has control of it? And if that's the case, why not just get a bunch of other people in there to sacrifice themselves? And again, the rules just seem to be a little bit
well, and maybe some people can figure it out a little more. When Deadman went into the House of Horrors with Damien, like Joshua Williamson, it seemed like he had painted himself in a corner. You need a sacrifice. You're not going to kill Damien. Anybody who dies in the nightmares ends up dying in real life. Well, when you get there, you see in that in between that Deadman didn't die. Like, it was wonky. He was able to kill another version of himself so that he could get it and continue. But here, you just have Insomnia kill himself in the nightmare so that he dies in the real world. But then all of a sudden, what comes from that? Because all of a sudden it unleashes the power of the Nightmare Stone, which we didn't see before, and how this plays. And pretty much we're all screwed. Everybody does wake up, but the nightmares have been brought to the real world. And that's where at the end of this, I'm like, really? Like, what does that mean? How did it work? What's going on? And I just, at this moment, before we get to the epilogue, I just think it's very wonky, very, it's very confusing about what would happen. Batman ends up waking up then, and you get what you had at the end of the Batman. I guess it was the Batman tie-in issue at the end, or it was one of the deals where Batman wakes up, oh my God, are we still in the nightmare? And Damian says, no, we lost. But then you also end up seeing, the nightmare creatures are all in the Hall of Justice and all that. But then all of a sudden you see there's Insomnia outside with the Nightmare Stone and says, come play, show the world, what you really are. And I'm like, I don't know that this really works, where you kill yourself in a nightmare so that your body dies. That's the sacrifice, but you have killed yourself in the nightmare. So how are you still there? It doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah,
and maybe that's the power of the wonky, MacGuffin Nightmare Stone. It's very odd.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think of too is because I've been enjoying, and again, I use that word loosely, I've been enjoying some of the Night Terror tie-ins much more than the Night Terror's events. I'm thinking to myself, I'm reminded of Jeremy Adams' Night Terror's Green Lantern. Insomnia was terrified of Hal Jordan. Does he not realize now that he's going to have to deal with Hal Jordan?
Yeah.
I mean, Insomnia hasn't come across as particularly intimidating. I think the Murder Man is more intimidating and scary and Ravager. And I also think that in the pages of Flash, that nightmare was a little bit more terrifying. What Barry Allen Flash had to deal with. The whole thing just seems a little bit. It just seems like
everybody does. The guy was going through a nightmare, supposedly and he couldn't find what he wanted. He was getting desperate. He was getting depressed about it. That's not a way to elevate your evil character. He basically failed in his mission. He failed, but at the end, he tries to make it like, oh no, my mission was always to have Deadman find it and bring it to me. Bullshit. And if that's the case, you're just fully admitting that these tie-ins didn't need to happen, which I already said they really didn't. But you end up where you have a villain who just kept failing. He failed. If you read all of the tie-ins, each tie-in, he failed. He never went and found anything, and then had to have Deadman feel bad, act like a dummy, and take the stone to him. I mean, at one point, you had the big bad villain couldn't even do anything in the waking world, had to send those, again, ill-defined sleepless nights, had to go and do his work for him because he couldn't even stay in the waking world. He got stuck back in. He's like, he has failed over and over and over. Yeah. Just at the end to say, haha, I did it. I brought these nightmare visions. You have the gun bat. You end up having that future doom bringer deal of Superman. Yeah,
Super Reaper, I think.
Super Reaper. And you have even the Wonder Woman deal. But the problem is here, and you already mentioned, he's tying in Insomnia into that death metal stuff. This just looks like Dark Multiverse shit all over again. We've seen shit like this. This isn't feeling new. And even then, we've seen, you even mentioned it before, when I see Gunbat, like, I saw you get destroyed twice. Why would I be that scared of you? You got ripped apart. All of you did. So go to hell. And at the end, that's how you end. To be concluded in Night's End, like every other one said. But I said most people are saying, well, this is the final issue, and that's just an epilogue. But I don't think that's the way it's playing out. We certainly didn't get a real finale here, and because of that, I didn't like it.
That's right, and it should be mentioned, too, that a lot of the nightmare threats were, in fact, killed and eliminated in the tie-ins, so there's no nightmares to bring back. Like for some of these heroes.
I guess you just can bring them back because it was a nightmare, even though the spell out if you die in the nightmare, it's bullshit. It's such a rules. Every rule break is just, I don't know. The art looks good at some points. Yeah. I didn't mind the art. But overall, this was bad. This was really bad. And when we go forward with the next two books, I will admit, right now, I actually like some parts of both of the next two issues we're going to go through.
Yep.
Why can you have that and the main book sucks this bad? It really stinks. It really does. But what would you give it?
I would give it a 4.5.
Yeah, I actually thought you were going to be way more positive than me. Oh. I'm a 4. So we're almost right.
Yeah.
Same score. What is your reasoning for the 4.5?
Well, first of all, the art. I do actually like the callback to death metal. And one of my favorite aspects of death metal was I have really fond memories of Scott Snyder engaged with me, and I did a whole video on it. And we argued about Doom versus Justice, and I disagreed with him as to why Doom won. And Doom shouldn't have won, and what it said about humanity, and he was defending that. And I really enjoyed that era of the Justice League. I don't like how it ended and that they lost, but I like that callback. So that, frankly, probably giving it a 2 or 3. But also, I want to be very clear. The tie-ins, I would say probably 20 to 30% of the tie-ins are positive in my mind.
You're way more than me. Yeah, my thing, though, is, and you brought it up, the idea, it's cool to say, death metal, that's a neat deal. And I said, I don't think that Joshua Williamson's going to point of the bad thing happening. And also, the Justice League were dead for a bunch of the Dark Crisis. So it makes more sense for it to happen during metal, death metal, whatnot. But when you brought up the fact that we kind of did reset, people came back, and maybe you should have went and dove into that a little more. The idea of maybe this is the one family that didn't have people come back, and that would really be upsetting, the idea that they were left behind. And there were some people who were left behind. I mean, at the end of that, Roy was dead for a bit, and then that even pretty wonky. But overall, now I've convinced myself. I'm at a 3.5. I'm at a 3.5. I thought I was going to be more positive with a 4, but I'm at a 3.5. But there you go. That is the official kind of finale to the Night Terrors.
You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.